Good morning, everyone, and happy Thursday. So, we're set for a pretty big day today, given the craziness we saw yesterday. A lot of stocks are looking pretty good, especially growth plays. So, of course, DraftKings, but even Zoom's in a good setup. Corsair, Redfin's looking pretty good. So, we do have a lot of good setups going. We could see specifically with Corsair, they had a pretty amazing turnaround yesterday. I guess you could say they were lingering right around lows of $20, and they closed just around $21.60. So that one's looking pretty good. Definitely keep that one on your watch list for today. And there's just a lot of stocks that are in some pretty good setups to the upside. But with that being said, some stocks you got to be a little bit careful with. Tom, I don't know about you, but when you look at like some of these companies, like I would say AMD, it had I think an 8% up day yesterday alone, and then they're right around this like 150 resistance. Like, to me, I get a little I don't know, not as bullish, you can say.
Yeah, definitely. It's a pretty big worry, whenever you see stocks go up that drastically. And, sometimes we've seen where Powell pumps the market and then the next day it starts to dip back down a little bit. And I would not be surprised if that happened, and like you said, an 8% day is definitely no small day by any means. So with it getting up to that resistance, I could see a bit of a pullback as well. I really hope that we see a continuation, but, I think the chances of a pullback are a little bit greater, especially on these higher priced tech stocks. I feel like that possibly DKNG and the rest can possibly continue up, but hopefully we see the bigger stocks continue. And looking at the SPY, Mike, it looks like here at open, looks like we do have a green candle coming in initially, but if it follows what was happening in pre-market, I almost could see a bit of a dip, almost like what we're seeing with AMD here.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking pretty good so far. Most of the stocks on my watch list are green. We have Enphase really leading the way. They're up like 3%. And then Sunrun's not looking too bad either. But so those ones are going up, and that's awesome. But what I think is very interesting is if you look at ticker symbol AI, this one is down, but it's only down 0.5%. But this is one of those stocks that had, I think it was an 8% up day yesterday, or maybe 8 or 9 or 10%. I don't know. It was up big time, and that's what I'm kind of seeing with AMD. It's way too early to say, but I feel like over like today and then the next couple of trading days, the biggest opportunity will lie in the stocks that are really beaten down. I guess you could say Zoom and stocks like that.
Yeah, I really agree. And, we're seeing it happen at open here. AMD is actually falling below that 100 SMA, which is not a good sign on the 5-minute chart. That's usually a pretty bearish sign, and it's falling below it pretty drastically. We had that big bounce there around 148 to 150. So it looks like it's setting up pretty good. And, I've had a support posted here around 145. Maybe if we can break below that, it would be even more of a sell-off.
Awesome. All right. So good stuff. So far, the market's rallying. Boeing's breaking out too, which is good. They're just under that $200 resistance. But yeah, so that's good. Tom, do you have like any favorite setups right now? Because I know there's just a lot going on, like anything for day trades or swing trades or maybe like long-term dip buys.
For some swings and for some longer term dip buys, I've really been eyeing up PayPal. I think that they've been one of my favorites. And looking at them this morning, they're actually they're pulling back now on the 1 minute, of course, but at market open, they were kind of rocketing up above that 195 resistance. If they can continue with that nice momentum from yesterday, I think that PayPal might start to go back on the uptrend. And whenever I'm looking at their daily chart here, looks like they posted some higher lows actually, which is a pretty good sign. And if we start to see an uptrend, I think that PayPal might start to go up towards this, $210 resistance, maybe 220 before we start to see a bit of a slowdown. And, this is a pretty good stock, I think, for the longer term as well. And I'd recommend it for leaps and for shares. I think it'll be good for both ways. And, these stocks like PayPal have been beaten down. And there's even been some other ones like Square, Mike, which people have been eyeing up. And this one's actually up again today, not doing quite as well as PayPal, but, they're turning around, and I think they're a good dip buy as well.
Yeah, I think Square's pretty good. And I don't know if you saw the news today, but Square is actually being sued by like H&R Block because Square changed their name to Block. So
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how that's going to play out because like I guess you can say like it's obviously very similar, but I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And, that might bring some negative selling pressure into Square in the short term, but with the way Square's been talking about getting into crypto and all this stuff, especially different stuff like for Cash App and stuff, apparently on December 14th, Block actually unveiled a new Cash App feature to gift stocks and Bitcoin on there. Like apparently you're going to be able to gift this stuff to your friends. So like Mike, I could send you Bitcoin, I guess, on there. So sounds pretty interesting. And I'm glad to see that they're, continuing to do stuff. And hopefully this helps them turn around. And, the CEO of Twitter just stepped down to kind of pay more attention to Square. And I think that should show that he's pretty confident in them.
For sure. And then we have Ironical saying, did you see Adobe? So I just saw it right now. It's down almost 10%, Tom. So it looks like they reported earnings, and the market clearly did not like that. It looks like their forecast fell short of estimates. So that sucks to see. I mean, all the news I'm seeing is the selling pressure is because of the estimates, or the forecast, I should say, because their earnings weren't bad. Like their EPS was $3.20 versus a $2.70 estimate. So their EPS was fine. It was just that forecast.
Yeah, I think that's really just the main thing, that lately we've been seeing the forecast almost make more of a difference than like how the company's actually been doing. Like we see Zoom come in with good numbers and they continue to fall on bad forecasts, and those outlooks definitely play a big part, and it sucks to see them down, but I will say they're getting pretty close to this support down here, right around 550. They're within about $20 from that, so I think that could end up being a pretty good level if it holds up.
There we go. All right, so I just want to cover some like stocks that are really moving. So far there's not anything with like any great momentum. Like yes, NV. I mean, actually AT&T's not bad. Like I'm glad you pointed that one out. Like 3% is pretty big for a slow-moving company like AT&T.
Yeah, it is. And AT&T has a long way to go. So hopefully they can start to get some nice like 10% days or something. Like, man, they need to turn around pretty drastically here on the chart, I think. But looking at them, they've been a good value stock, but in the end, they've obviously been on a pretty bad downtrend. So I really hope to see them go up this year. And, they are up quite a bit today, but, keep in mind that they're not even really back above. Well, they are breaking above Monday's level, but, they're not up too much. Like, at least if we look over the past month, Mike, the stock actually leading my watch list is Roku. I'll tell you, this stock is really turning around. We've been talking about this one in a lot of the different live streams, and I'll tell you, it looks like it's doing pretty well today, up 5% now.
Let's see, Roku. Well, it has been getting beaten down pretty badly, like especially over the past couple of months. So I'm glad to hear that it's popping up, especially about that $200 support. And it's not a bad short-term play. The problem with it though is that IV is kind of high. Like for the past couple of months, their IV has been lingering anywhere from like 50% to maybe 65%. Right now it's at 80%. So it's like it's pretty high. So honestly, I'm really thinking about maybe like dip buying some shares just for like a couple weeks and then dumping them off. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely like a riskier play. I mean, I guess in the worst case scenario, I could just hold it for the long term because they are a solid company.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks because, there's a lot of stocks that have been going down a lot, like Roku. You can say other stuff like PayPal and stuff like that. And, of course, PayPal's IV fell back down a little bit here over the past week, but you could see for a while there, their IV was also pretty high. And it seems like that with a lot of these stocks that are at these good levels, all the IVs are high on them, which is going to make it hard for leaps. So it seems like shares are going to be almost the way to go down here, at least on this dip. On other dips like what we saw back in May and June, during those dips, the IV was getting pretty low. So it was seeming like almost like a good time for the options, but now the IV is pretty high. So I just wanted to point that out for everybody that it's not just, Roku specifically. There's a lot of other stocks that you should probably be looking at shares on instead of different call options.
For sure. There we go. So I just want to welcome everyone to the stream really quickly. Thank you guys so much for joining, and welcome Mike, Alex, George, Bill, Iranical, Vicky, and Spacely. Thank you guys so much for joining, and let us know what stocks you're watching, and we can definitely take a look at them. Spacely says top of the morning. Thanks for joining. But yeah, I mean, Tom, I want to cover AT&T just for a couple more minutes. I know you mentioned it, and I remember a couple months ago, AT&T announced that they are cutting their dividend, right? Or they're reducing it, we should say. They're reducing their dividend. And at the time, AT&T was trading for, I guess you could say, like around $32, maybe $33. And if I remember correctly, around that time, AT&T was also paying maybe around like a 10%, maybe 9% dividend, something like that. But since the stock price fell so much on AT&T, its share price almost got reduced by half. With that being said, their dividend percentage is now back to 9%, 9.5%. So it just, I just thought that was very interesting. Like when they're, like even though they cut their dividend in half or they significantly reduced it, they're, like they're still paying a 9.5% dividend.
Yeah, definitely. That's crazy to see. Were you talking about this news release that just came out at 8 this morning, Central Time at least?
No, I mean, I was just saying in general, because I do remember a couple months ago they did announce that they were reducing their dividend and the stock tanked off of that. So I wasn't referring to like anything specifically today. It was just like, just the overall stock over like the past couple months.
Yeah, definitely. I was just looking at their news and saw that today they actually declared a quarterly dividend of 52 cents a share. So yeah, they definitely kept it up pretty high. And, looking at it, I really am glad to see AT&T moving up off of this. I think that's great news. And hopefully more long-term investors come in and start to push this one up. And, I think that, I'll be honest, Mike, I think that the whole entire cell phone industry has been a big letdown over the past few years. Like if we look at Verizon, like look at them even over the past few years, some pretty bad growth going on. You look at T-Mobile. Now T-Mobile's done a little bit better, but even over the past like 6 months, they've been on a pretty big dip and they're actually down year over year. They're actually down if you count the beginning of last year. So looking at it, I feel like that these cell phone companies have been getting beaten down quite a bit. And I'm wondering when they'll finally start to go back on the uptrend. And, I remember everyone was talking about 5G this, 5G that, but it looked like it didn't really help out any of these companies at all. And, I'm really hoping that, I'm hoping to see like Verizon, AT&T, and, T-Mobile, but hopefully they get some good news come out. And I just hope to see them honestly innovate and something cool can happen for the future.
Yeah, I remember all the hype, like specifically everything about 5G. And while it does suck to see like a lot of these stocks falling, maybe it does provide a pretty good buy the dip opportunity. Maybe with Verizon, maybe AT&T, maybe T-Mobile, but they're at pretty good levels.
Yeah, they are. Verizon's actually dipping down to the level they were at during COVID, which is crazy to see that they're actually like right around that $50 support, kind of bouncing off of it pretty well, creating a bit of a double bottom. Actually, I'll tell you, this one actually looks pretty tempting for shares for the longer term. And looking at their EPS, I'll tell you, their EPS has not been bad. It's been kind of staying stagnant and even slightly growing. So that's a good sign.
There we go. So welcome Kevin to the stream. And then George had some awesome information saying T's dividend is not reduced yet. It will be next year. And then he said, but for sure, it tanks so much that at these values next year, they'd be paying almost the same percentage. So exactly. And great information, George. Awesome stuff. And then we have Iranical saying, Mike, your voice is low volume. So let me know if my sound's a little low. If it is, I'll definitely adjust that. But checking back in on the market, Tom, are you seeing like anything else moving besides T? Because I'm looking at a couple different scanners, and the only thing I see breaking out is AT&T.
Yeah, actually, BABA looks like it's having a bit of a turnaround today, Mike. I'll tell you, in pre-market, BABA was looking like they were dipping pretty bad, and they ended up at market open falling below 122. But look at this crazy move back to the upside. They're actually starting to break out pretty well. They're only up 1.7% because of the crazy movement. But I'll tell you, it looks like they're starting to run up pretty good. They're actually climbing up my watch list as we speak. And I'm also seeing some stocks like Lucid Motors starting to turn back around. If we can see them start to break out above like $42, I think they could have a nice run. Also, NIO, they were dipping down this morning. And if we see BABA continue up, maybe NIO will start to come back as well.
True. Yeah, I think BABA's actually looking kind of good right now. Like they are holding their ground pretty well. It's bouncing right off that 120 support. And, like we know how these China stocks are. Like they get beaten down horribly for like months, and then all it takes is like a couple days, and they'll be up 20 or 30%. I mean, that might be a little bit a little bit dramatic, but they do rise a lot. Like it's not it won't be crazy to see like a 7% up day on Baba.
Yeah, definitely. Like I could see them moving pretty drastically from like 125 possibly like back up to 140 pretty easily. And like looking at that on the chart, like a move up to that 140 resistance would be a pretty small move, honestly, too. And that's a 13% move on the stock, not even on options. So that's great to see. And like you said, whenever these things start to run, sometimes they can get some pretty good momentum. Like the last time we got a pretty good uptrend here, it looks like the stock went on like a 27% to 30% uptrend there. So that's a pretty good sign.
There we go. All right. So George said, yeah, the voice is very low. I always have to change my volume to match your stream. All right. We will definitely get this figured out. All right. Sorry about that, guys. We'll definitely get that audio problem figured out. And then we have N saying, hi, your thoughts on GGPI. All right, Tom. So looking at GGPI, let's see how the setup looks. I do not like it, to be honest with you. This is the first time I'm ever looking at this company, and just based off the chart, I don't want to call it a pump and dump, but it's just not for me.
Yeah, it's just not for me either. I will say on the daily, it looks like it kind of hit like a support around like, maybe $10 to $11 somewhere pretty close to that. We can see yesterday it hit that 1083 level and just rocketed right back to the upside. Maybe that was Powell's doing, though. It looks like it happened right around that same time. I don't know anything about them. It sounds like something foreign. So possibly, some foreign markets could impact this in a way. It sounds kind of German, but looking at it, I will say it looks like there's a pretty good support that it bounced off of yesterday. So it might get a good bounce, but I'll be honest, I just think that, there's a lot of other better setups out there.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a SPAC too. Yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, so I'm definitely going to stay away from it. But looking at some other potential opportunities, Baidu's kind of rising up there too. Baba, I don't know, Tom. I mean, how's the market overall doing? Because I know there was a ton of like upwards momentum yesterday, but how are we holding up today?
We're actually not holding up too well. It looks like we are actually starting to see a bit of a pullback here. And, there's lots of stocks in the green, but I will say it seems like some of the bigger stocks are red. Like, unfortunately, we have AMD pulling back like you kind of thought this morning, Mike. We have NVIDIA pulling back as well. Apple's in the red. Facebook's in the red. Microsoft is green, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're red soon. And, the QQQ is also going red, even with the SPY. So it's just definitely a pretty big down day. Amazon's even red. And they're, we all know how big they are. So, some of the biggest stocks in the market right now, I think, are just dragging it down. But, hey, the growth stocks are doing decently well. We have Fastly going up. They're actually starting to break out quite a bit, climbing to the top of my watch list here. Like we talked about with Baba, I think Twitter and PayPal have been looking pretty decent down here as well. And hopefully they start to turn back around. But I'll tell you, it seems like some of these stocks in the market is just, it's just dragging it down. Like some of these big tech stocks like AMD, NVIDIA, obviously Facebook's dragging it down too. It's just not a very good day for the larger stocks, but I feel like the growth stocks are holding up decently well.
Yeah, check out Lucid. They're getting very, very close to a breakout right at 42.
Yeah, there we go. That's awesome to see. I know they were turning back around, and if they get that breakout, I think that could make for a pretty awesome day trade today. I really hope that it's not just Lucid. I hope that XPEV can get some upwards momentum. I hope NIO can as well. And, I know Lucid's been a very hyped up stock. I wonder how Rivian's been doing. And wow, Rivian actually reports earnings tonight after close. That's going to be very interesting to hear. And, it looks like they're actually dipping down today quite a bit whenever Lucid's looking pretty good.
There we go. Yeah, and then we're also getting like a slight breakout with like gold and silver. I wouldn't call it anything crazy by any means, but over like the past day, I mean, it is a pretty big move for, gold and silver after Powell spoke. And I think that's something else to like keep on your radar. With that being said, gold is not going to move like Lucid or Tesla by any means, but Then again, the options are extremely, extremely cheap, relatively speaking. Like, if you think there's a chance that gold can break out, IV is at a really, really low level. So you can get some pretty good deals on the options chain.
Yeah, you really can. That's actually a really good point, Mike. I might actually get into some longer term calls on GLD because I'll be honest, they've been consolidating around 160 for a very, very long time. And generally, whenever inflation goes crazy like it does, gold and silver are generally some pretty good hedges against the market. And I'll say I really feel like some bigger investors, even I think even like some governments are going to be buying up gold. Like I know China is a huge player with gold. Same thing with some of those countries like the UAE and some of those like oil countries. I know that they're also big with gold. So I really hope that we see gold start to break out. If we see a big move up above 170, I think it might be about time to get some good leaps.
There we go. Alrighty, so then we have Sal saying, "Good morning, everyone. Thoughts on Qualcomm for shares?" I like Qualcomm. They're a solid company, and they should do pretty well over the long term.
Yeah, I would say I like them too. You know, they should be good for the long term. Now, in the short term, I could see him pulling back, but for shares, as long as you're averaging in and you want to, maybe buy like 1/10 or 1/5 of your current position right here, I think it might be a good way to go. Now, just keep in mind they are a little bit overextended. I will say it was definitely a better buying opportunity whenever they were dipping down towards like 126, 130, those types of areas. But now they are definitely, they've been on a pretty good uptrend here for the past couple of months. So definitely be wary of a bit of a pullback, but I love them for the long term as well. I think they'll do great. Their processors are in a ton of different phones and stuff like that, so it should be pretty good.
Awesome. And we have Mike saying, "I think I missed my shot on picking up Ethereum when it was at 3,600." So yeah, we actually let's see. I actually haven't looked at Ethereum in a little bit. I'm gonna pull it up in a second. It looks like Tom's gonna pull it up as well. But let's see. So yeah, I mean it's at like 4,100 right now. I mean, we all know how volatile these cryptos are. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it retests 3,600.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it doing it. It kind of looks like it's been on a downtrend, and honestly, I don't know when the downtrend's going to stop. So I could see it retesting 3,600 as well. But I will say it kind of bounced off of there and formed a pretty good support. So definitely watch out for it. It might end up holding up right there, but I could definitely see it retesting that as well. I feel like that there's a fairly high chance of it doing that, at least over the next like month or so.
Gotcha. All right, and then let's see. And then we have N saying TSP shares, is that good to buy? TSP, let's take a look. TSP, this is another one where I wouldn't touch. It's just like, I feel like there are so many other better opportunities out there. I mean, even if you didn't want to do DraftKings, like even Zoom at this level, like I think that's awesome. Zoom's good, Chewy's good, Redfin. I mean, if you want to be relatively safe, like even Disney at this level, like Zoom and Disney at these levels, it's hard not to buy them.
Yeah, it actually is. I mean, look at Disney starting to go up here. I think it's awesome. Zoom, I think, is forming a very nice double bottom. Like, let's go look at Zoom actually on the 90-day, 15-minute chart here. You can see how defined this double bottom was. There was a huge downwards candle at open last Monday, and we actually came down, touched right around like 174, to 175, and then bounced right back up. Same thing with the move yesterday, formed a very nice double bottom. I'll be honest, Mike, like this one's really tempting me for some shares or maybe even for some leaps right here. The IV looks a little bit high relatively, but I mean, man, shares, you almost just can't go wrong here. You're almost at the absolute bottom. And even if Zoom goes down for another month or two, I still feel like there's a pretty good chance for some huge movement back to the upside. So definitely eye this one, guys. I feel like this is I don't know about you, Mike, but this might be one of the better longer term scenarios in the market right now.
I'm really tempted. Really. Like, as you're looking at it, Tom, I'm like eyeing up the pricing on the leaps. I'm really considering it. So here's the problem, though. Here's the problem. So I'm looking at the January 19th of 2024 expiration on a liquid stock like Zoom. The bid and ask spread is still ridiculous. Like the 200 strike calls, Tom. Like that's a common strike price for January 19th of 2024. The bid 4,200. Ask 5,200. There's a $1,000 bid and ask spread. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of a concern. So I mean, I guess you could like lowball the chain, but you probably won't get filled at a good price. So I guess that sucks, but I don't know. I'm definitely eyeing it up.
Yeah, that definitely makes it worse. And, maybe that just means we'll have to get some shares or just, maybe start out with shares. And then once it starts to go up a little bit, maybe the chain will get a lot more volume in it. Maybe, obviously the stock's been getting beaten down. So everyone's probably scared to buy calls at this point. But, hopefully as the volume comes back, we start to see some better pricing there so that we can get leaps. But man, even the shares look pretty decent. I know it sucks because 100 shares is going to cost you like 1,800, almost 20 grand, or 18,000, almost, $20,000 here, which sucks. But, in the end though, I think it'll be good for the longer term, and maybe selling a put will just be the way to go.
I mean, Tom, with like Robinhood and a lot of platforms nowadays, you can invest $8 in the Zoom if you wanted to with the fractional share trading.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy? I can't believe that. I've been telling people about that a lot lately, actually, and they can't believe it because they're like, man, you're telling me I can buy $100 worth of Amazon? And I'm like, you can if you want. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but you definitely can. And, if Amazon goes up 100%, your $100 is going to go up 100%. So percentage wise, it's still the same thing.
Yep. All right. And then let's see. With the next comment, we have George saying Ford above 21 again. There we go. So Ford is actually looking pretty good, Tom. They're up 4.5% today, and they've been holding their ground really, really well.
Yeah, they have actually. The setup on the daily looks a little strange to me. Like it's a very volatile consolidation that they've had here at $20. But I will say the setup looks a little crazy. Like we can see in the past, whenever they rose, it looked a little bit more normal, like some nice staircasing, just some nice movements to the upside. This was definitely some volatile stuff going on, but I will say it looks pretty good. Like it's starting to break out, and I wouldn't be surprised if they started to run up. They've had a lot of awesome news. I know they brought their dividend back, which is awesome as well. People love that stuff. We were talking about AT&T getting rid of their dividend, and look at AT&T stock for the past year going down, and look at Ford. They've been doing better. They're starting to bring their dividend back, and they're exploding. I'm glad to see it, and I feel like for the longer term, Ford and General Motors are going to start to do pretty well, and even General Motors is up 3%. They're not breaking out like Ford is, but they're looking like they might make a push for all-time highs pretty soon.
True that. And then we have Shelly saying, good morning. Next resistance for NVAX, please. Absolutely. So looking at NVAX, wow, I mean, it's actually looking pretty good. N is in like Nick, Tom. NVAX.
Oh, there we go.
V, Victor.
There we go.
There we go. So we could see it's looking pretty good. It's up 3%. We're looking for the next resistance level. We could see supports right around 180. There's a little bit of resistance right around 185. Let me just see if there's a couple other levels, though. Give me 1 second. So we have resistance right around 185. I would say there's a little bit more resistance right around like 188. And then that final level right around 190. So definitely keep that in mind, but it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's looking pretty good. Now, I will say the IV is very, very high relative to the past few months. So always keep that in mind when you're playing it. I think it can be great for day trades, though. Like if we see that breakout today, like Mike said, I think that you could see a pretty good play to the upside, especially with some calls. But just keep in mind, I would not hold them for too long with that IV being pretty crazy.
Yeah. All right. And then we have Mike saying DraftKings is down again. It is down a little bit. It's down like 0.6%. Let's see. Yeah, like 0.6%. The bad news is that it's down, but the good news is that it kind of did the same thing yesterday. Like it was down right around market open, and then by the end of the day it blasted up, and it is still above some pretty decent support levels. So yeah, I mean, it definitely does suck that it's down, but then again, it did the same thing yesterday.
Yeah, it did. And, I thought that there was some pretty good news that came across yesterday, Mike, with DraftKings. And, we can see their stock did pretty well yesterday in the middle of the day. Obviously, Powell helped them out a lot, but I know that Goldman Sachs adjusted their price target to $63 from $66, and they maintained the buy rating. And I thought that was a really cool thing to hear. Whenever I go down here and I read that DraftKings has an average rating of outperform and price targets ranging from $34 to $105. I'm really glad to see such a large institution like Goldman Sachs keep the price up around 63 to 66. Like Goldman Sachs is pretty respected, and I think that their price targets are, fairly accurate. And whenever I look at it, I think that 63 to 66, or yeah, like that $3 move. Of course, it was a move to the downside, but with how much DraftKings has been falling, I think they could have made that a lot lower. So I think that's actually really good that they maintained the buy rating and that they kept that price target up there. That's just a really good thing to hear. And obviously, if DraftKings goes up to $63, we'll be seeing over 100% increase there.
Yep. Crazy to think about. All right. And then we have Z saying, good morning. What do you think about Costco? Looking at Costco, COST, they're down a little bit today. They're a value stock. They're a powerhouse. They're a great company. But they're down today. I mean, it looks like they might be, I don't want to call it a double top, but I guess you could say there's a good amount of resistance right around 565 to like 567. So it's as simple as it's just like at a pretty decent resistance level. But I do like it for the long term. They're a solid company, and they'll probably do very well over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be awesome for the long term. In the short term, we don't really know, too much of, how much more upwards movement we're going to see. Like obviously they're around all-time highs, so it's going to be pretty hard. But I feel like that as we see this, it's obviously going to either continue up or fall. But I feel like that if we see a breakout, up above the all-time high, then I think you could play it for some short-term plays to the upside. But I would honestly start to look at it to the downside a little bit. But I think that they're a powerhouse too, Mike. They're awesome for the longer term. And I've been loving the way that they've been moving. I've been actually comparing them to stuff like Walmart, and they've just been outperforming them like crazy. Now, I know Walmart might have a higher valuation and stuff, but it's still good to see the growth.
For sure. All right. And then we have Roman saying, why is BABA crashing? So, Tom, what do you think about BABA?
Yeah, BABA, I mean, man, we saw that nice upwards movement earlier in the morning. And I will say, though, BABA's had a very volatile day. And, these China stocks are all over the place. So you have to be very, very careful with them. And it looks like BABA almost got up to that like 126 resistance. And it looks like they hit that and bounced right back down. So I don't know. I would say it looks more of like they hit resistance and came down. I don't know if there's any major news. I'm not really seeing any major news that came across that would justify a move down like this in the middle of the day. But, keep in mind, these China stocks are all over the place. Look at the crazy movement that they had yesterday at market open. So it's going to be a really hard thing to judge with BABA. They're all over the place. I'll say if they fall below like 121, I think that puts might be the way to go. But, it was just an unfortunate move back down. I know that in the Discord, Mike, in discussion, I think he was playing some calls on this, and man, it turned around pretty hard on him.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it happens. A lot of times when you see those breakouts, they continue up. Like let's say there's resistance right around 124, and then it blasts through that. A lot of times it'll just keep on going, but there are situations like what we're seeing now where it gets rejected pretty bad, and that's just a part of trading, unfortunately, and that's where the failed breakout comes in. But now what we know for the future is that there's resistance right around 126. So when it retests this 124 to 126 level, we could keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. And one other way that you could have played this, I think that could have been, or a little bit better, maybe you even played it like this. Let me know if you did, or if it helps you at all. But one other thing is whenever you saw the breakout up above 124, whenever you entered, maybe whenever you saw it getting up towards 126, maybe sell like half of your position. Like if you bought 2 contracts, maybe sell 1 contract and then hold the other one just to lock in some profits really fast, because, it's never bad to lock in some profits. That way you have a little bit of a cushion to work with there. So that's another way you could have done it. But definitely, sometimes these stocks break out like this and turn around, and it's just, it's a crazy thing to look at. And on the 1-minute chart, you can see how quickly it happened. If you weren't paying attention for a couple minutes, you could have definitely got screwed over.
Yep. All right. And then let's see. We have Percy saying, Mike, what can you say about SOFI? Good time to sell puts. So I think it's a pretty solid time to sell some put options. IV isn't the highest, but still the stock's pretty low. They're in a pretty good industry, and they definitely have a lot of room for growth. like I said, I think selling puts is pretty good right now. And honestly, that's probably the ideal way to play it. Like, I probably wouldn't get leaps at this level. You can get shares if you wanted to, but I think selling puts is good for a variety of reasons. Like, you're literally getting paid to potentially buy the shares at a low price. And, maybe if you sold the puts, maybe at like the 14 strike price or lower, that could be pretty good. So definitely keep that in mind. And I like the setup.
Yeah, I really like the setup on it. I think it can be pretty good. I love this bottom support here. So for the longer term, I really hope it goes up. I think that it's at a pretty good price point to buy. And, I think the daily chart looks a lot better, of course, than the intraday chart. The intraday chart looks all over the place, but I really like this daily. We've had almost like 6 touches almost at $14. Like, man, it's been holding up very, very well.
Yep. All right. And then we have Kevin asking about T calls. So for T, I'm not a huge fan for the calls, mainly because of the dividend. So, and then I guess you could say IV is a little bit high too, and earnings soon. So I would not do calls, but I would consider shares on this one. One, because IV it's not high, but it's elevated, and then you have earnings soon, so you don't really want that. And then two, when you own calls, you're not entitled to the dividend. So at least if you own some shares, you don't have to worry about time decay. You don't have to worry about options pricing. You have unlimited time, like I said, and then you also get the dividend. So if I were you and I was looking to play T to the upside, I would get shares rather than calls.
Yeah, definitely. That 9% dividend is going to be a pretty big deal. Like, let's say T, closes at like, $18 at the end of next year or something, your dividend would have almost made up for that. So, there's definitely stuff where that dividend comes into play pretty largely, and it's going to help you out quite a bit, especially with it being 9%. Like, as this stock's been going down, I can't believe how high that dividend has gotten.
Exactly. And then another thing to keep in mind is I know that a lot of people go to options for leverage, obviously. But another thing I wanted to point out is it's also important to consider the risk profile. For example, let's say you're just really bullish on a company, Tom. Like, let's say we look at AT&T and you're like, you know what? I'm really bullish on this company. I think they're going to rise. This is just a random example, by the way. One option you can do is maybe buy some leaps on AT&T. Like, maybe you went out to the January 2024 expiration and you bought the $25 or 25 strike leaps for January 2024. And you're doing this and you're leveraging your money because you want the stock price to rise. So you could do that, or what you can do is, let's say you were going to put 5 grand into the options. Maybe you take that 5 grand and I don't recommend this, but if you're looking for leverage, some of these brokers allow relatively cheap margin rates. Like, I'm pretty sure Robinhood's gold margin rate is like 2.5%. So you can borrow money from them for 2.5% and easily leverage your money that way too. Now I don't recommend it, but I'm just saying, if you were to go with the shares, you would still be leveraging your money, and then you own the equity so that you have unlimited time. You don't have to worry about options pricing. And then two, let's say January 2024 comes along. If AT&T is below 25, you lost your entire investment. If AT&T is at like $24.90 with the options, you would have nothing left over. But with the shares, you would actually be up if you bought now. It's just something to keep in mind. As an options trader, it's important to know that trading options isn't always the ideal way to go. Sometimes it's just smarter to get shares.
Yeah, it can. It can be a lot smarter. And I think in this scenario, it definitely is. The IV is high. And if that starts to go down, even as the share price goes up, that'll probably end up, ruining that options pricing. So, definitely, I think eyeing up some shares will be the way to go. And, Mike, kind of like I talked about earlier, lots of stocks are in this type of scenario, not with the dividend, but at least with the implied volatility being high. Like we talked about earlier, Roku possibly, buying them down here. Look at that IV. You'd almost have to get shares with the way the IV is. And, there's lots of other stocks with the IV shooting up like this also.
True. All right. And then let's see. We have Square saying, what a bull trap from yesterday. Yeah, it's definitely looking like that so far. Whether you're looking at the market or just some other stocks in general, we're definitely seeing some profit taking, which does kind of suck. Look at Apple, Tom.
Yeah, Apple's actually it looks like they're almost like flash crashing here. Like this is a pretty crazy drop to the downside. Actually, they actually are almost giving up the gains from yesterday. They're actually almost to their opening price, which is a pretty bad thing to say. You know that I would say stocks had a very good day following Powell yesterday, and it looks like they're pulling back pretty drastically now. You know, like we've seen in the past where where the market would fly up and then go down the next day. And this looks like, unfortunately, this is one of those scenarios.
Exactly. All right. So right now we have some stocks looking good, some stocks looking pretty bad. Of course, we have profit taking on like Apple, Microsoft, companies like that. Pfizer is still going strong though, Tom. Like this thing has been such a powerhouse, and like they're a huge company, and they're like they don't move in like the way that Tesla moves, but like they have been really like volatile in like a really good way lately. Like a 1.5% update is huge for a company like Pfizer, especially after the past week and the past month with how they've been doing.
Yeah, that actually is really key, Mike. I'm really glad to see them breaking out like this. Like looking at that daily chart, they're getting so overextended. I thought that early this morning with that downwards movement we were seeing, we might see a bit of a pullback, but I'm so glad to see them turn around. This is great to see them getting up this high. They've had that great vaccine news, and man, this company's been so good this year. I know that they've had their share of healthy pullbacks with all the crazy like vaccine and variant news and all that stuff. But I'm glad to see them, continuing to break out like this. It's just they've been such a powerhouse with these vaccines. It seems like every time a new variant comes out, like obviously Pfizer's CEO is almost like the first one to come out and be like, hey, our stuff works for it. Like it seems like they're always kind of the first to the game, it seems like.
They're doing good. We'll say that. They're doing really good. And I'm curious, like with all of the other variants that'll probably come out, like I'm sure that would definitely benefit them as well. Like it seems like over the past 2 years, like timing has really been on their side, and there's just a lot of things working out for them. You know what I mean? Like in like a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and these, like you said, there might be more variants coming out. Like, well, how many have we seen now? Like, it's crazy, to go back and I can't even remember all of them. I think there's been like 3 to 5. Some of them didn't stick around for too long. Some of them were like in other countries and didn't actually make it here. So it's just it's definitely a weird scenario. And I just like you said, I feel like that if there is more of those, that could definitely help them to the upside. And I know there's been some other companies like BIIB and different stocks like that trying to make their vaccines. I know that mRNA has been one of the other bigger vaccine companies, and you can see they're actually not moving near as well as Pfizer is. It looks like Pfizer has been doing very well with their Omicron vaccine and all that stuff.
Yep. All right. So just trying to see what we have like moving. Like I will say that gold and silver is actually doing pretty good today. It's holding up very well. Gold's up 1%, which is actually pretty big for gold. And just to put something into perspective really quickly is like if we look at like whether it's gold futures or GLD or whatever, we can see it's definitely trending up. But when you look at the options, like let's say on GLD, you might look at GLD and say, oh, nice, a 1% update. That's nothing. But that's a 35% move in the call options that expire in January. So it's like, think about what would happen if there was a 5% update, or maybe not a 5% update, but like maybe like a 5% up week or a 2% update. Like the returns get pretty crazy.
Yeah, they do. That's actually pretty crazy to see, Mike. And, that's awesome. I know that GLD has been one of the crazier. It's a pretty crazy thing to play with options because, they have so much stuff affect them overnight and stuff. And I feel like as long as you get some longer term calls down here, I feel like it's such a smart way to go. And even some GLD shares would be smart, but it might not move very quickly. And with the IV being so low, why not just get the options anyways?
Gotcha. All right. So let's see. And then we have Z saying loving SoFi, buy long-term stocks, 50 to 70% off. We will use Pfizer in our hospital and some other hospitals in my state. So yeah, definitely makes sense. But yeah, I mean, looking back at some of the breakout plays, while we have Pfizer and gold breaking out, Tom, we have Rivian kind of tanking down. So I know there was a ton of hype with this one, and they're not like crashing or anything like that, but they're definitely struggling a little bit right ahead of their earnings report.
Yeah, and you know what? Like they don't really have too much establishment yet. So whenever they report these earnings, I mean, like let's be honest here, they're probably going to report some pretty bad stuff. Like obviously they might have a good outlook or something, but man, like I don't really expect them to report much of any sales or anything like that. So we might see a bit of a crash out of them, and if we do, it might create a good buying opportunity. You know, we've been seeing lots of stocks go down lately on these earnings, and some of them have been crashing quite a bit. Now, obviously, this is a totally different sector, but you know, like Chegg, you know, you could just almost name just about like a lot of these stocks, like Zoom, you know, like lots of stocks are just down in such a drastic way. And they were getting a little bit overvalued there for a while. And obviously, Rivian, I think, was overvalued, of course, for a while too. And I could see them tanking down. You know, like I said, they just don't have anything really established yet. Of course, those Rivian trucks are awesome, but I'll be honest, you know, like they haven't really came out too much with them yet. Like, of course, you know, one person out of, you know, the whole country has driven them, but like, you know, I feel like that we just needed to see a bit more sales, a bit more stuff come out before we start to, you know, start to look at these earnings in a bullish way.
For sure. And then another thing that just to keep in mind, kind of like what we said earlier, is lately it seems like the forecast matters more than anything else. Like you look at Adobe, like their EPS was pretty good. I know there's a lot more to the earnings report besides the EPS, but you know, maybe Rivian comes out with, you know, maybe mediocre numbers and earnings and all that stuff, but if they have an amazing forecast, maybe it blasts off.
Yeah, it really could, and I hope it does. To be honest, like I actually really like Rivian's truck, and I love their vehicles. I'll tell you, I think they're an awesome company, and you know, whenever everybody was really harping on their valuation in the beginning, you know, I felt like I was like one of the only people out there actually, you know, arguing their case because you know those trucks are like whenever they win like Motor Trend's Truck of the Year, it's definitely no slouch. So definitely, I think it's going to be a pretty big thing going forward. And you know they have lots of big backers. Like I believe Rivian is backed by Ford, and was it Amazon, Mike?
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
think it was Ford and Amazon. So those are two definitely humongous companies, and you know like I could see them going up as well. But it's just with the earnings, I just don't know what to even think about these right now. Like you said, there's always that chance that you know the numbers come in bad and then the outlook's awesome, and I hope that's the case because they won Truck of the Year and hopefully that boosted pre-orders and different stuff.
Exactly. All right. And then we have Square saying, glad you guys are doing a live stream. Good work. And thank you for the info you guys share. Thank you guys so much for joining. You know, we love doing these streams, and it's great to have you guys asking questions and interacting. It's pretty fun. But, Tom, are there like any last minute plays or setups or anything for today? I mean, we covered most of the notable stocks today. So far, the market's selling off a little bit. So, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I will say that it looks like as of right now, the market's going to be going a little bit lower, at least intraday. We're trying to bounce off this 470 support with the SPY, but my watch list has just been slowly turning back over to the downside. You know, I will say the oil stocks are doing pretty well, like Exxon and Mobil looks pretty decent today, as well as Chevron. But you know, there's some stocks running up like Lucid today. Roku's in the green by quite a bit, but I will say lots of stocks are turning red. It seems like my watch list is slowly becoming more red than green. We have AI down a lot. DraftKings has been on a huge downtrend. And then these huge stocks like NVIDIA, Target, AMD, like we're just seeing some pretty big drops. Even Apple, Tesla, like all these stocks are actually at the bottom of my watch list. I'm just scrolling through the bottom, and it's just a really bad thing to see so many large stocks dropping like this. I could definitely see the market starting to pull back a little bit harder. And that doesn't mean it won't rise by the end of the day, but I will say just be very careful today. You know, a lot of people thought that we'd see a continuation to the upside after Powell pumped the markets up yesterday, and we're seeing a bit of a pullback. So it's going to be tough. Hopefully we bounce off the 470 support and start to go up, but with the way I'm seeing stocks pull back, it's going to be pretty hard.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining today's stream. We have a lot going on in the market. Like Tom said, a good amount of stocks are pulling back, but there should be opportunities to the downside, so definitely keep that in mind. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for joining, and have an amazing rest of your day.